Today, women make up a significant portion of the United States Armed Forces. There are more women in leadership and senior leadership roles in the United States military than any time in history. As of 2016, all combat jobs in the U.S. military are open to women. Starting with the American Revolution and continuing through the turn of the 20th century, women were officially barred from U.S. military service. However, that did not stop some women from fighting. Most who chose to fight disguised themselves as men, especially during the Civil War. While many women served as nurses, cooks, and in other support capacities, they were not recognized as members of the military. In 1901, the Army Nurse Corps was established by the U.S. government as a permanent part of the Army. It would remain an all-female unit until 1955. And in 1908, the U.S. Navy established the Navy Nurses Corps, which would remain all-female until 1965. While considered part of the armed forces, the nurses were not afforded ranks and privileges as the other male service members. Loretta, Perfectis, Walsh made history when she was allowed to join the U.S. Navy Reserve as a sailor in 1917. As a yeoman, her duties included non-combat support roles. However, this was the first time in the history of the U.S. Armed Forces that a woman was given a non-medical role in the military and permitted rank, privileges, and pay same as the male service members. When World War I started, she and other female yeomen served in clerical and other support roles. By the end of her 4-year enlistment, Walsh had achieved the rank of chief yeoman. After World War I, female yeomen were phased out of the service, leaving the only role for women in the Navy to be that of nurses. World War II greatly changed the role of women in the military. In 1942, with the need of women to fill the support ranks while men were assigned the task of combat, the U.S. Congress authorized the Women's Reserve of the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve, known as SPARS. The Navy's Women's Reserve were referred to as WAVES. The Marine Corps also had Marine Corps Women's Reserve, and the Army had the Women's Auxiliary Corps, known as WACs. Women worked in many support roles during World War II. Here, 2 WACs operate a radio telephoto machine. U.S. Armed Forces were segregated during World War II. Female units, like male units, were segregated based on race. However, that did not stop thousands of African American women from serving. Many served as nurses who were selected to care for African American military patients as well as German prisoner of war patients. The 6th 888 Central Postal Directory Battalion was a unit of the Women's Army Corps made up of all African American women. The battalion was sent overseas to tackle issues regarding a backlog of U.S. mail. The battalion quickly ended the backlog and under their organizational skills vastly improved the mail service. Many members of the unit were awarded Campaign, Good Conduct, and World War II victory medals during their service. The late 1940s included major changes for women serving in the military. The Army-Navy Nurse Act of 1947 placed the Army Nurse Corps and Women's Medical Specialist Unit into part of the regular Army and Navy and ensured that all nurses were classified as commissioned officers. In June of 1948, President Harry Truman signed the Women's Armed Services Integration Act, which allowed women to become permanent, regular members of the U.S. Armed Forces in the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force. Prior to this act, women, with the exception of nurses, served in the military only in times of war. However, the act limited service of women by excluding them from Air Force and Navy vessels and aircraft that might engage in combat. And 1 month later, in 1948, President Truman signed the executive order banning segregation in the armed forces. Through the 1970s and 80s, women in the military began to rise in senior officer ranks, with women being promoted to generals and admirals. In 1975, President Gerald R. Ford signed Public Law 94106, allowing women to be admitted to the all-male military colleges. And the year 1980 saw the first female graduates of the U.S. Military Service Academies. On April 28, 1993, combat exclusion was lifted from aviation positions by Les Aspin, permitting women to serve in almost any aviation capacity. Jeannie Marie Leavitt became the first U.S. Air Force's female fighter pilot in 1993 and was the first woman to command a United States Air Force combat fighter wing. Major General Leavitt currently serves as Chief of Safety of the United States Air Force. Admiral Michelle Howard was the first female four-star admiral in the Navy to command operational forces. She was commander of the United States Naval Forces Europe while concurrently serving as commander of United States Naval Forces Africa and commander of Allied Joint Force Command Naples. She was the 38th Vice Chief of Naval Operations, making her the highest-ranking female in the Navy. She was the first African-American woman to command a United States Navy ship, USS Rushmore. Admiral Howard retired in 2017. In 2013, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta removed the military's ban on women serving in combat, overruling the 1994 rule. In September 2015, Ranger School was permanently open to women. In December of 2015, Defense Secretary Ash Carter stated that starting in 2016, all combat jobs would be open to women. Over 700,000 women have served during post-9/11 war, including Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom.